Now again, I'm not saying that you don't love the other person, but when you get to where you have to have their approval, you are codependent upon people, then something is wrong with you, not just the other person. I don't care what they're doing. You should be to a place that, man, it's just like water off a duck's back. You can get to a place to where God is so real to you that if other people are criticizing you, it's not going to derail you. I'm not saying that you like it. Something's wrong with you if you like criticism, but you ought to be able to cast your care about it over on the Lord. And if you can't, it's because you have pride. Which, let me explain some things here. Some people think, well, pride, man. I had one guy walk up to me when I was teaching on this, and he says, I'm listening to you, and I understand what you're saying, but he says, you're wrong. He says, I'm a very angry person, but I am not a proud person. He says, I got such low self-esteem, I just hate myself, and nothing works right for me. And he says, my problem isn't pride. Well, you've got to redefine pride. Because pride isn't only arrogance, lifting yourself up and thinking you're better than everybody else. Pride in its simplest forms is just self-centeredness. You are just focused on yourself. And you can define pride as being totally focused on yourself. You can define it as being dependent upon yourself, to where you don't cast your care over on the Lord. You know, you can turn over to 1 Peter chapter 5. Just for time's sake, I'm not going to do this, but it says that God resists the proud and gives grace to the humble. And then the very next verse, most people disconnect this, it says, casting all of your care upon him because he cares for you. That's not a separate thought. One of the ways you can tell whether you are a prideful person is whether or not you are self-dependent. If you have trouble turning things over to the Lord, if you're the type that when you have problems, you stay up all night worrying about it, how am I going to fix this? That's a prideful person. You may not define it that way, but that's what it is. You can't just cast your care over on the Lord. If you have trouble giving this problem to the Lord and saying, God, what are you going to do about this? And of course, you're listening, and if he tells you to do something, you'll do what he tells you, but it's not your problem, it's his problem. If you are carrying the weight and worry and care about things, you are a prideful person. So pride is not just exalting yourself. People with low self-esteem are very self-centered people. And I can say that from experience because I was an introvert. I couldn't look at a person in the face and talk to them. I mean, I was tormented thinking about standing in front of people and speaking. And you know why? It was because I was worried about what's everybody going to think about me. Am I going to say something stupid? Am I going to do something wrong? And I usually do. Matter of fact, my wife just bought me a hand towel that says, God, keep your arm on my shoulder and your hand over my mouth. Because I tend to stick my foot in my mouth fairly often. And so anyway, I was afraid. But you know what it was? It made me introverted. It was because I was constantly aware of what's everybody going to think of me. And I actually was already in ministry. I knew what God wanted me to do, but I was struggling to do it. And it was so bad that for the first 2 years that I ministered, every time I got up, I swore I'd never try it again because it was such a bad experience. And I said, God, I won't embarrass you or me again. But it's like Jeremiah 20 verse 9 says, it was like fire shut up in my bones. I couldn't forbear. I had to speak, and so I'd try it again. But it was a mess every time. And finally, I remember this one Mexican guy walked up after I'd been teaching, and he put his finger right in my chest. And he says, you've got some good things to say. And he said, you could be a blessing if you ever cared more about the people you're ministering to than you did about yourself and what they thought of you. And boy, when he said that, it was like a dagger in my heart, but I knew it was true. And it helped me to realize that, you know what was wrong? That was pride. Being timid, timidity, shyness is pride. You're thinking about yourself. There's some of you that have had God heal you, deliver you. You've had miracles happen that could bless other people, and yet if I was to ask you to come on the stage and say something, you'd freeze. Why? Not because you doubt God can do it, not because you don't have a testimony, because you don't know the truth. It's because you're worried about yourself. What are people going to think about me? That's pride. So only by pride comes contention.